Stealing Home by J. Torres by David Namisato, a First Chapter Friday read aloud video with the Word Nerd. Before we dive into Chapter 1, let me tell you a little bit about this great graphic novel. Saito is a happy boy who reads comics books and is obsessed with baseball, especially the Asahi team, the pride of his Japanese-Canadian community. But when the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, his life, like that of every other North American of Japanese descent, changes forever. His family is forced to move to a remote internment camp, and his father must spend months away from them. Sandy, his mother, and his brother cope as best as they can with the difficulties at camp. Over time, Sandy comes to realize that life is a lot like baseball. It's about dealing with whatever is thrown at you, however you can. It's about finding your way home. In this emotionally gripping graphic novel, J. Torres has artfully woven a fictional story into a historically accurate, thoroughly researched account of the events surrounding the internment of the Japanese Canadians during World War II. Using the approachable graphic novel format, the story of this grave chapter in North American history is gently told with sensitivity and insight, and the theme of baseball runs through the story as a message of hope and renewal. I love this book, and I know you guys are going to too. Let's dig in. Vancouver, British Columbia, summer 1941. The Asahi baseball team had fans all over Vancouver, but for us, they were the home team, the pride of Powell Street, the champions of the Japanese community. Here you can see people lining up out in front of the stadium to get into the game, and then you can see lots of people in watching the ball players. Baseball was more than a sport to us. It was literally the level playing field where we were equal to everyone else. The Asahi were more than a baseball team. They were heroes who took us away from it all. They helped us forget our troubles, even if just for one afternoon. The Asahi players were smaller than average and couldn't hit as well as the others in the league. So instead of trying to out-hit their opponents, they scored runs by bunting and sacrificing. The batter would tap the ball without swinging, making the ball so hard to field that the runner would be able to advance. They would then steal bases, sneaking from one base to the other, stealthily, swiftly, methodically, all the way home. They called this strategy brain ball. In what would be their last season ever, the Asahi were knocked out during the semifinals. It was a shock to their fans and a surprise to the team that had dominated the league and were the defending champions. My father called it a bad omen. December 7th, 1941. We can see a scene of a naval ship, of airplanes, of bombs and cannons and destruction. In the next scene, we're in Sandy's living room. His parents are listening to the radio, and it's saying, "I repeat, the Japanese have attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii." Sandy and his little brother walk in. They're throwing a baseball around. They don't realize that both of their parents are looking so nervous. "Papa?" Sandy asks. "This is not a good time." "You said we could play catch." "Not right now, Sandy." "But you said..." "Not now." Sandy's mother says, "Why don't you and Ty go play in your room?" "We want to go outside." It's not a good time to go out." "Why?" "It's supposed to rain," his mother says. "But it's sunny," Sandy says and points outside. "Go upstairs, please." And then in the next scene, we see his mother looking sadly at his father, who's sitting in the chair just worrying and worrying and worrying. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, I was pretty much like any other North American kid. I went to school, I read comics, my favorite radio show was The Lone Ranger. But I had Japanese classes after school, while other kids had piano lessons or swimming lessons or Boy Scouts, Girl Guides. Also, I loved baseball. You can see posters of all of these things that Sandy likes on his wall, including the Asahi baseball pennant and the adventure poster and the Lone Ranger there in the corner. Just a regular average kid. I loved watching baseball. I loved watching the Asahi play. I loved watching the Asahi with my father. Papa was generally quiet, some might even say serious, and he mostly kept his emotions to himself. Except when he was watching baseball. I also love playing catch with my father. You can see him throwing the ball and it goes whoomp, hitting the glove. And the dad says, "Good technique. I wish we got to play more often. Remember, hold your glove out. Keep your eye on the ball." I remember the summer I got my first baseball glove. You can see the ball hitting him in the head. Boink! Ow, Sandy says. My father would only let me play with the tennis ball. And that's why we use a tennis ball. But I want to play with the hard ball like the Asahi. Maybe when you can catch better. Use the tennis ball for now. It's only temporary. On Monday, December 8th, 1941, we find Sandy back in school. This is the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The teacher is saying, I'm sure most of you know that we are now at war with Japan. And one of his classmates says, yeah, get those Japs, get them all. The teacher says, Billy, all of you remember, the Japanese who bombed Pearl Harbor, they are not the same as the Japanese here. The Japanese here are our friends. You've grown up with each other. You've gone to school together. You played together. You are friends. Remember that. And that same boy who said those really inappropriate comments leans forward and he whispers in Sandy's ear and he says, I don't believe her. My dad says you could be a spy. I came home from school that same day to find Mama frantically covering up all the windows with blankets. It was for the blackout. Everyone had to turn off their lights and cover their windows in case of any further air raids. We were trying to keep light from escaping our windows and attracting attention outside. But it seemed more like Mama was trying to keep things outside from coming in, keeping us in the dark about what was to come. Later that week, I went to the park with my friends Charlie and Hero. We played pickup games with the neighborhood kids there all the time. This time, the kids there wouldn't let us play. The couple called us names, and when Charlie told them to shut up, they started throwing rocks at us and chased us away. Dirty spies, they yelled. Go away. My father was a doctor. He had a practice on Powell Street. That's why everyone called him Saito Sensei. Sensei meaning teacher, which is a term of respect. He was born here, but he went to school in Japan. At that time, Asians weren't allowed to go to medical school in Vancouver. Even after he returned from Japan, he was only allowed to work in Oriental hospitals. So he opened his own practice on Powell Street, treating mostly Japanese patients. And his father is saying to him, just stay away from those boys. No baseball. For now. Maybe my father felt guilty or sorry for me, or maybe it was his way of carrying on with the war happening. But he actually gave me my first real baseball a couple of weeks after that incident, for Christmas. With that ball came the promise that come summer, I could also sign up for the Japanese Little League. Well, I think you're ready to play, he said. I gave him such a hug. Okay, you're welcome, son. He didn't really hug back. He wasn't big on displays of affection, but he had his own way of showing how much he cared. We turn the page and find that it is now January 1942. The New Year's usually met with hope and optimism, not with dread and fear. Fear of the unknown. Can we go to the park and play catch? I need to see a patient. Maybe tomorrow. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope and optimism right now at Sandy's house. It was a new year, but business as usual for my father. In fact, you might say business was pretty good for him. I have to help deliver a baby. How long will you be gone? You never know with these things. And again, his father was leaving. Sandy is sitting on the steps when his mother comes to talk to him. He isn't coming, is he? Your father has an important job. People need him, especially this time of year. Why do more people get sick in the winter? Sandy asked his mom. And she says, your father says it's a lack of baseball. If the Asahi played all year, people would never get sick. Your brother's eating mochi left over from a New Year's party. If you don't go now, he'll eat it all. And they end their talk there. But then, in February, something big happens. This poster is hung up all over town, and it says, notice to all Japanese persons and persons of Japanese racial origin. Take notice that under attack orders number 21, 22, and 23, and 24 of the British Columbia Security Commission, the following areas were made prohibited to areas of all persons of the Japanese race. And then they list a bunch of cities and neighborhoods and areas in British Columbia. And further take notice that any person of the Japanese race found with any of the said prohibited areas without a written permit from the British Columbia Security Commission or the Royal Canadian Mounted Police shall be liable to the penalties provided under the order in Council PC 1665 from the British Columbia Security Commission. Basically, the Japanese people who were living in British Columbia were told there were places they were not allowed to go because the people did not feel it was safe. They were worried about the Japanese. To find out what happens next, you're going to have to pick up your own copy of Stealing Home by J. Torres and David Namisato. You can find it at your school library, purchase one from a local indie bookstore, or find it via link in the description box. Speaking of the description box, I also have a link for you for more graphic novels. You can find all of these amazing stories told in graphic novel format on my channel. Links for everything is below. Some of the videos even include interviews with the authors and the creators. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I've got so many great things here for you. First Chapter Friday videos, brain breaks and trivia quiz games, direct instruction videos, teacher tips, instrumental playlists, and more. Please like this video and subscribe so you never miss what's next. Happy reading!